Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Cowboy Bebop Space Serenade. This was sent to me by Japanime Games and is designed by Florian Siriu and Johan Benvenuto. Humanity has spread across the solar system, and governments must rely on bounty hunters to enforce a semblance of law in the vastness of space. Play as one of the infamous crew of the spaceship Bebop and hunt criminals in this action-packed and jazzy deck-building game. Let me show you how to play. So, Cowboy Bebop Space Serenade is a competitive deck-building game designed for 1 to 4 players in which you'll play as one of the infamous crew members of the spaceship Bebop. With your cards and with the help of the other crew members, you will participate in the capture of criminals wanted by the ISSP. Rewards for these bounties will help you accumulate points of renown until your final confrontation with the deadly Vicious. At the end of the game, the player with the most renown will win and prove to their crewmates that they are the best bounty hunter in the solar system. Are you ready, Space Cowboy? So, in the game flow, if you're not familiar with deck building games, you start with a basic deck of 10 cards, like this. And you play some of those cards on your turn, and you'll accumulate resources and buy new cards, activate abilities, and capture criminals. There are 2 main phases, which is preparing the deck and capturing lesser criminals. That's most of the game. And then the final conflict against Vicious near the end of the game. Once Vicious is captured or runs away, the game ends, and the player with the most renown wins. So let's go over sort of the basics of how deck building works for those who aren't familiar. Here's Spike's player mat with a fuel cube at 1. Here's his deck. On your turn, you draw 5 cards, and you look at them in your hand. And then you can play cards, like this card will give you Woolongs. You may also use effects as well. You may pay 3 Woolongs to remove this card. This will give you Woolong, and I'll explain all these currencies later. This gives you 2 fuel, this gives you a Woolong and a clue. But yeah, you play the cards in front of you and activate their abilities. At the end, you discard them all in your discard pile. Then you draw 5 new cards and wait until your next turn. If your deck is ever empty, you shuffle your discard pile. That's your new deck. Whenever you purchase a card from this area, like let's say you purchase this Jet card, the Jet card now goes into your discard pile. And now is officially part of your deck. And that's pretty much it. You're just, and you know, like most deck building games, you'll want to maybe remove cards you don't want or, you know, add cards for combos. But that's basically how deck building works. And like I said, if we look at the a typical card here, this tells you how many Woolongs it costs to purchase the card. This tells you what currency or resources you get, which is 2 fuel. And we have an ability here. You may pay 4 Woolong to gain 1 clue, and or 4 Woolong to gain 1 fight, or whatever, strength, or whatever it's called. I'm going to briefly look at the criminal cards here. Like here we have Lee Sampson. This guy, you need to get 2 of these fight tokens off of him, or 2 of these clue tokens off of him. This tells you how much renown you get for getting him. We'll get into that a little bit later. There are also damage cards. Sometimes the game will force you to draw damage, especially when you take resistance tokens from a criminal's fight pile. You'll have to draw, for each token taken, you'll have to take 1 damage card. And this one just goes into your discard pile, and later we'll sort of clog up your hand. And they all have different effects as well, but I'm not going to go through all of them, but yeah. There are 4 resources in the game. Yellow Woolong coins are the currency of the game. You use those to purchase cards from the purchasing area up there. Any unused Woolongs on your turn are lost at the end. You don't get to save them. Fuel, however, you do get to save. So on your character card here, and this is just Spike, but I mean there's like, you know, 3 other characters as well. We'll get into those later. You can use fuel to move around, apply effects, or use abilities. However, you cannot store more than 10 fuel. Strength and clues, I kind of went over before. Those resources are used to take off these criminal tokens to get closer to capturing them. Depending on the criminal, like this one, it's only 1 strength is required to take off one of these, and it's 2 clues to take off one of these. But for MPU over here, it would be 3 clues to take one of these tokens versus only 1, or still only 1 strength for these. But this one requires just 1 token to be taken off of them. Now, like I said, on your turn, you look at the 5 cards you have and you play them. So let's just do like a turn, for example. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 Woolongs. So we also can move one non-player character for free. So let's move, I don't know, let's move Jet to Earth. Spike also gets 1 fuel and 1 strength. So we'll move the cube up on his fuel track, like so. Some cards, when you play them, have a team effect. So far, these are the cards that I've played on my turn. So that's in my play area. Now, let's say I play this card. It's going to cost you. I'll get 1 fuel. You may put 1 card you purchased this turn on top of your deck. And now, if you'll notice, there's a little spike symbol down here. If I've played any spike cards this turn, I get this extra bonus. So I'll get also another fight. And, kind of like the game Star Realms, the order doesn't matter. So let's say I played this card first, and then I played a spike card, I can still activate this retroactively. Now, team effects only trigger once. Even though I played another spike card, it's not like I get this again. However, now that I played a Fey card, if I played this card, like New Hit, I would get 2 more Woolongs on top of the 1 clue. And so it can kind of stack like that. Some cards, like the basic for a few Woolongs card here, you can remove it from the game. So if I paid 3 Woolongs, this card is out of my deck permanently. But for now, let's count up how many Woolongs we earned. We earned 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 Woolongs. So, one action you can do on your turn is purchase a card. Let's look over here and see if we want anything. Ooh, this ain't bad. So, not delicate type, it's 2 strength, and the effect, each of the other players who are on the planet with a criminal takes a damage card. It's a very aggressive card, but that suits Faye. So if I buy it, it goes into my discard pile. Another action I can do is move. So let's say Spike here wants to move to Earth. In this case, you check this. It's currently 1 fuel. So Spike spends a fuel to go to Earth. And you adjust your tracker like so. This movement gauge can be modified on certain conditions. If a criminal card is revealed after a previous one has been captured and the corresponding planet board is already occupied by a criminal card, then that planet's gauge goes up by 1. If it's already at 3, the criminal escapes, which we'll get into later. Certain cards will modify the gauges on planets. If a criminal escapes or is captured on a planet, the gauge on that planet board goes back to 1. There's also some stuff for Vicious. We're not going to get into too much of that right now. Now, Spike is on Earth, which means if he wanted, he can try to help capture this criminal here. So, since Spike collected 2 fight on his turn, he could go 1, 2. Because right here, it says it's 1 fight per token. However, Spike will then have to draw 1 damage card per token he took. Here it's just a scratch and a rough day. This goes on top of your deck, this goes in your discard pile. If you ever take a resistance token from Vicious, you draw 2 damage cards each. However, if you do investigation with clues instead, you don't take any damage. Now, since Spike did such a good job with MPU, no more tokens are left in that pile. That means Spike has captured this criminal. What you do is you take the criminal card and place it face down to the right of your character board, over here as your prize. And then each player who has gained capture tokens that match the planet that criminal is on will get to convert them into renown. Because in some cases, maybe let's say the Jet player had already taken, like, let's say a clue off of MPU. Then he gets that token, right? Even though Spike is the one who defeated it, Jet still gets credit because he still had a token from that criminal. So if Jet had 1 token from that criminal, he would get 1 renown point. Spike got 2 tokens off him, so he gets 2 renown points. Any characters located on the planet where the capture took place, go back to the Bebop without spending any fuel. If this gauge was higher than 1, it would go back to 1. Then what you do is you look at a little big shot screen here, and you're going to reveal 2 cards, one after the other. So for each card revealed this way, check it. So here we have Ganymede, which is already occupied by Morgan over here. But that means what happens is the movement gauge goes up by 1, and this card is discarded. If this had already been at 3, like I said before, this criminal would escape. And then we look at one more. Oh, okay, so this is also still occupied, so this goes up by 1. Some criminals, when they appear, will refresh the purchasing area with this symbol. That means all the cards in the purchasing area get discarded and 5 new cards are drawn. Now in this case, no new criminal appeared, but if one had, you would place it on the planet, and then you look at it and go, okay, this needs 5 tokens for fight, 5 tokens for investigation. Now going back to the theoretical if a criminal had escaped, if Morgan escaped here, like I said, you would reset this down to 1. All characters go back to the Bebop, and anyone who had tokens for that criminal, discard it, because they failed to capture him. Now, in this big shot deck here, Vicious is actually shuffled into the last 3 cards. So when you finally go through and you capture criminals and or they escape, eventually Vicious will be revealed. And that's when the second phase of the game starts. The Vicious miniature comes into play. Now, any criminal cards that were discarded or those remaining in the deck will be shuffled together to form Vicious's movement deck. Alright, so you draw a card, and this is where Vicious goes. So his miniature starts here. Vicious's card goes here and has piles of tokens for his fight pile and his clue pile. If you want to confront Vicious, your guy's got to be on the same planet as him. And then you can either choose to confront the criminal on that planet or Vicious. If you use 3 clues, you can take one of Vicious's investigation tokens, or, like before, you can fight him for 1 strength each. However, for each Vicious token you take through fighting, you have to draw 2 damage cards. At the end of each player's turn, if Vicious has lost any resistance tokens that turn, he will move. If it's just investigation tokens, he doesn't move. You then reveal the top card of the deck and resolve it. If the location is different, which it is, then Vicious is going to move to Ganymede. If the location did match where he was, like if it was another Mars card, then the gauge on the planet goes up by 1. If it's already on 3 and a criminal card is there, that criminal escapes like normal rules. Now, as soon as one of Vicious's token piles is empty, the game ends immediately. However, if you go through the movement deck, every player gets 1 last turn after the final card is revealed, then the game ends. If Vicious is still uncaptured, he escapes and everyone loses the Vicious tokens that they collected. Once Vicious is captured, all the Vicious tokens everybody collected from him are converted into renown points. If he escapes, you still have a winner, but it's a minor victory. Any remaining criminals escape, and the capture tokens are all discarded without any renown points because you didn't catch them. Then you add up all the points you had got throughout the game, through your tokens and through the criminals that you captured, because they also have renown values on them. Whoever has the most renown points wins. If there's a tie, whoever captured the most criminals wins. Now, let's go through, finally, some of the characters. First off, it's actually very important, even if you don't play with 4 players, you still use all the miniatures, because NPC characters can be moved with action cards. And you can use a character's first ability, or another character's first ability, if your minis are on the same location. So if we're looking at Spike here, his 2 abilities are, he can spend 3 fuel to draw a card. You can discard it to draw another one. 5 fuel, you can buy a card with a 2 Wulong discount and place it on top of your deck. You can use the character abilities as many times as you want, provided you have the cost to pay them. Now, let's say the Jet player was on the same planet as Spike. That means that Jet, and if you look at Jet's card here, it indicates Jet can use Spike's ability, his first ability, because they're on the same space. However, he cannot use Spike's second ability. Each character has their own first ability that everyone else can use if they're on the same space, and a second ability that is only theirs. So Jet's here, he can spend 2 fuel to remove 2 damage cards from his hand and or discard pile, and he can spend 5 fuel to gain 1 strength to be used immediately on the planet where he is located. You don't have to draw any damage cards for resistance tokens gained, which is also quite nice. Next, we've got Faye.
Faye's all about the money. So she can spend 2 fuels to just gain 1 Wulong. She can also spend an X amount of fuel to buy a card worth X amount of Wulong. You cannot use Wulong to complete the purchase, but just use fuel as money. And finally, we got Ed. Ed here can spend 3 fuel to gain a clue, which is used immediately on the planet where she's located. And then she can also spend 6 fuel to choose a card from the discard pile and place it back into her hand. And those are the 4 character abilities. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. You run around building up your deck, buying cards, either using fight or clues to get tokens, getting renown, capturing criminals, and finally capturing vicious. And that's the game.
So I'm going to be honest, when I saw this was a licensed game, I was hesitant, but this game is actually really a lot of fun. It's a deck building game, which helps, because I love deck building games. Although I've played some bad deck building games, but it also feels thematic, and it's very clear to me that the designers had a lot of love for the original series. However, it's important to note that I played with somebody who hasn't seen much of Bebop at all, and they had a good time too, so you don't have to be a die-hard fan to have fun with this. This is not a mind-blowing deck builder by any means. There are no crazy new concepts, although I do like the sort of, collecting fuel and moving around the boards. In a way, it's kind of comforting, because if you already know how to play a deck builder, you can jump into this pretty quickly. The only thing that may be new for some players is, moving around planets, which has kind of like a Clank-like feel of moving to the right space, using the right currency to take down criminals. I always enjoy combo systems based on color or type in deck building, like in Star Realms. This one has a very flexible one, where you don't have to worry about the order exactly. It's just, if I played a spike card at some point, okay, then my spike team ability triggers as well. It also gives the 4 characters a very cohesive feel, as if you are teaming them up to pull off combos, which feels nice. Something I also really appreciate about this game is that all of the card effects and iconography on the boards are extremely clear. This is such a problem in other games, but in this game, I never had trouble understanding what any card meant, what any board meant. It was always very, very clear. The game just looks great overall. I love the minis. The show art fits, and it feels, again, thematic. It feels like a craft of love here, for sure. Really, one complaint I have, and I don't think this is actually a complaint, more of a compliment, is I think the game feels a little short. I would have actually loved to keep going before Vicious showed up. But I think that's a testament to how solid this game is, because I wanted to keep playing instead of it dragging. So if you're a Bebop fan and you like card games, this is an instant win. Absolutely buy this. It's just a really solid package, especially if you like Bebop. If you're a fan of just deck building games but not familiar with Cowboy Bebop, I would still recommend it. Just don't expect it to be mind-blowing, but it's very slick, very just tightly designed. It's going to be very similar to stuff like Clank or Star Realms, almost kind of a combination of both. But, those are great games, and this one is no exception. I really enjoyed this.